Hey everyone, this is just a little overview of walkthrough of some of the sheet skills that you'll need in level 2 for Google Certified Educator. And so we're going to just kind of talk through some of these, and I'm going to show you some resources, and I'm going to build on some example data on the fly that you'll have then to be able to review afterwards when you're all done with this. You can come back and watch this a little bit later. So the first thing that you need to have is the skills checklist for Google Certified Educator Level 2. It's by Eric Kurtz. He put a lot of time and effort into going through the whole curriculum and pulling out the bits and pieces that were relevant. And so I'm going to jump down to the sheets section, and these are the skills that you have to know with sheets. And so it's a nice way that Google's laid this out as far as being very specific in the types of things you need to create. So there's the most important one here, the most probably the challenge, I think, is pivot tables. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Were there any other parts of here that were really kind of tricky, or that were kind of new to you?
Maybe using the spark lines. I wasn't really sure what that was.
Okay, sparkline's cool. Yep, I've got some examples of both of those things, and we'll be pulling those in. Um, Okay, so I've got this blank spreadsheet that I just have right here, and what I'm going to do is drop in some other data from other spreadsheets that I have, like of my different workshops that I've listed over the years, or that I've used over the years. And so this is, people ask with data sets and with pivot tables, especially in level 2, why would a teacher use them? You say, like, I'm a grade 2 teacher, why would I ever want this? And I think the biggest proponent of it, or the biggest source, place of opportunity to use them, is really in using forms to collect information from kids. So in this case, this is a food diary where kids are writing down. They were assigned the task to once a week record a food that they ate and whether it was healthy or junk. And so we had 4 entries over time. And so the pivot tables will take this data. So like if you're looking at this data, and if you were just to kind of scroll down and through it even, you can't really tell anything. You don't know who's done what. Just looks like a bunch of form, responses or whatever. But in this case, we only asked the kids like 4 questions, and one of them we probably didn't even ask. 2 of them we probably didn't even ask. Date and time comes in with the timestamp usually in the first column. I wrote this. I had the kids actually write in the date that they ate this particular type of food, but we could have actually had those be the same thing. Then we asked their name, we asked what did they eat, and whether to classify whether it was healthy food or junk food. So that right there is the test. There's going to be a bunch of learning outcomes that we can decide, or we can talk about and understand based on using a pivot table to see this. And you really can't see it until we build one. So let's jump into that. So all right, so in order to start your pivot table, you always start by selecting everything, or I always do. So you start there, and then you're going to go to data, and then down towards the bottom, which mine is going to be too small. I have to make my font a little bit smaller. I can't quite see. Let's try this again. Select all, data, pivot table. Google's actually moving some things around in the menus and stuff as we speak. So there's some new things here, like split text to columns is now built in here under data. So I'm going to select pivot table, and it creates a new tab for us called pivot table 1. And so there's 2 parts that you see on this page. So this is the actual table itself is being built right here, and that's where it's going to live. And then this is the editor, the pivot table editor. And so this is where you actually do all the kind of magic stuff, and this is what can be pretty cool about this. So really there's these 4 parts. Well, first there's 5 parts technically, I guess, because there's the range that you're actually applying the data to. That's why we selected everything. We don't ever have to worry about that again, really. But the next thing,
As long as we select everything.
correct. It might be in case you can come back and you can check, and sometimes if there's new rows added to the bottom, it may not have gotten that in, or if somebody added a new column and you wanted to have that in there. Like let's say we went in afterwards and we put the student's birth date in there or something like that, and we could then do some data analysis around that. But we'd have to expand the range right here. This one rows 1 to 63 in case it goes over 63.
Just change it to 64 if you were
Correct.
adding one more, right?
Correct. Yep. Cool. So all right, we start here by building these things. If we look back at our our food diary data. This is the spreadsheet version of it. We got our columns here at the top, and those are questions. There are questions on the form. So in here in pivot table, under my rows, when I click add, I see those same 5 things. Timestamp plus the 4 questions we asked. So in this case, I want to say, all right, what did you do? Are we as a class eating more healthy or junk food? So I'm going to just look at that question, healthy or junk, and see what it's done. It's automatically, what it's done is it's looked through that whole list of options, and it's that people wrote in, and it's saying here are the unique ones. Here are the, healthy or junk. That was the only thing that anybody wrote. In this case, we had a fixed choice, so they couldn't get anything, ask about any or write anything else in.
If you went back in your data and let's say you added a third choice as though a student said not sure or something along those lines, would that automatically change on the pivot table?
Let's watch. So I just changed this one right here to Cole's fried chicken. He doesn't know whether fried chicken is healthy or not. Now before I hit enter, let's just take a peek. Oh, there it goes. It just jumped in when I switched pages. Right here. So now healthy or junk we have, and we also have I don't knows. Now here's the thing, like if you were to have a bunch of I don't knows, this is the thing that's more frustrating than anything. What I'm doing after these is I'm putting spaces after the last word, and you should think that that would be all 4 the same thing, but now on our pivot table they actually come out as 4 different things because of that trailing space. So if you ever do something and you get more than one, it's probably there's a trailing space at the end of it that I can't see this unless you double click on it, or if you hit enter you see that, oh, there's some extra spaces there, which is data integrity issues. So now we need to do some mathematics. We need to summarize them somehow, and that's the third section of the editor here, and that's values. So columns will split things out over, it'll look at healthy or junk over a number of years, let's say. Let's say if you collected the school year, or the month, like if we said each month it was something, we could put the months across the top, and then just look at the pattern over time. But in this case, we're not going to worry about that yet. So under values, I'm going to put in something that I know everybody answered, which I know they all had to require. We required their name, their student name. So I'm going to select student, and you see what it's done here is actually this pivot table editor is quite new, and it's smarter than it used to be. So now I can see here with these different kids, or so with all of our students, 62 times. The form was entered 62 times. And 30 of those times it said healthy and 32 said junk. So I always say they're healthy, they're a well-balanced group of kids because they're eating a balance between healthy and junk food. So they can, you can see that now with the data. Going back to the table, like the original spreadsheet, you can't tell that overall, right? Even by a quick glance.
Right.
So now we start to ask the questions about, well, what else can we figure out with this data? Well, we can figure out who's eating healthily and who's not. So if I drop in, if under rows, if I add a second row, like add in student, this is the name and shame of them part. So now, now you can see it's got healthy, and if I scroll down, it's got junk right below it. So it's got the healthy and total, and then there's the junk stuff. So put healthy. Here's all the kids that ate healthy, and here's the number of times that they ate healthy meals. Yeah, so see, that's pretty cool like that. You can just pivot it and take a look. Sorry, I got a fart in my throat.
So if you get the student name under the healthy, you just have to add the row under healthy or just...
You just hit, it goes in automatically, it'll stack them automatically, so healthy or junk will stay first, and then if I add in student, it'll drop in. Now here's what's really cool, and this is where we get to the pivot part of it, because you can say, all right, well, I don't know with each of these kids, how many did they, what's their balance, what's their how did they do on the healthy or junk, battle as an individual. This gives them as a class how they do. But if I want to figure it out as an individual, all I have to take is the individual, which is student, and I can, if I drag that up, you see how the cursor is changed into that little cross arrows? That means I call that the up, down, drag it around cursor, so that means I can drag it somewhere. And if I drag that up on top, and when I let go of this, you've watched my columns, now they've pivoted. And so now I'm going to untick these little show totals just because it cleans it up a little bit. But now you can see here's Autumn and then healthy or junk, how well she did. Yeah, and so Bree the same way. And if I wanted to just to do it the other way to show you what it looked like before, that's what it looked like before. So basically, that's the pivot part of this, which makes it really cool. And you start to, yeah.
Depending on how you want to see the data.
Exactly. So dragging one thing over another is a good thing. One good way to do it, to illustrate that. And let's just say one more thing with another example here is you can add more. So for, what did you eat? So in this case, I have dropped that in, and I'm going to untick show totals. And so we have Autumn, healthy. She ate oatmeal, tofu, and she ate junk. Her junk food was pizza.
So now you have more specific information.
Exactly.
Regarding each kid.
Exactly.
When you unclick show totals, why is that? What
it's you see these little when I turn it back on, you can see how it says the total for each kid. Then it has like a subtotal.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. And that's this.
Is that how many times they turned in the form?
Yes. Exactly that. Yep. So in this case, we can see like here, Bree, she didn't do all her homework. She only did it 3 times.
Okay.
So she that's what the show totals will summarize. This one summarized by healthy or junk. If we show totals for what did you eat, healthy total and junk total so there's kids, healthy total and junk total for each one.
Okay. So depending where you're clicking the show totals, it will change.
Yeah. And the overall one, I think oops, not that one. Show totals. This one does it right down at the bottom, I believe. Yeah, it gives me 62.
Okay.
Now here's the thing you notice when I click right here, my report editor is gone.
Yeah.
When I click inside, it's back. Outside, okay. Inside, outside, inside. So that's how you tell, or that's how you get it back if you lose it.
Great.
So with these, we can rename these now. This used to not be possible, but we could just say the count of kids that were in the particular identified that food as healthy or junk. The thing we can't see here, and this is where the pivot part comes in, is what if we take student out of it, and I just want to see overall, do kids know do they align the food properly? Well, we can see right there, bacon, 2 kids listed it as healthy. And you can't, here you can see that quite easily, because, well, you have to look for content. But if I flip it the other way around, if I were to, here we go. If I were to take what did you eat and pull it above here, and now I drop it off, so now I can see each food and what they called it, how many times. And here's where bacon's not the only one that suffered. Cheeseburgers, people were confused about cheeseburgers and chips and French fries, and quinoa. Somebody thought quinoa was a junk food.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, I mean, when I talk about this example in particular with teachers, that kind of helps them realize, oh, well, if depending on the types of questions I ask my kids and how you ask them, it can be a set of information that's very readily used or is ripe for a pivot table to help you analyze it.
Would it be something you're doing, making different pivot tables? So this where it says pivot table 1, I might just have the junk or healthy portion. Then I can make a second pivot table that would show what did you eat with the labels.
Correct.
So it could be, which would just make the table smaller.
It's
separate information a little more.
Yeah. So what's going to happen, and this is the weird thing about this. Well, actually, this might work a little bit better now because you can only have one pivot table per sheet. Like I can't have a second pivot table over here. But once I have the pivot table, when I have it, then I can, oops, not the hide menus, come back. I can insert a graph or a chart based on that information. So if I select the data that I want and then I click insert chart, it's going to give me some sample charts that or it actually picked the one it thought was going to be best. Now this isn't probably the best way of looking at it, but we can change these and we can look at, I think actually if we do chart type back here, if I did there, grand total, we probably don't need grand total on there either, but that is a graph, and this is just a chart that's based off of our pivot table 1, but you see it's kind of hot. It's taken our pivot table, it hid it underneath. That's kind of a secret trick that people do with spreadsheets, is that they'll hide the data table behind the actual chart in the file itself.
And then if we wanted to do the healthy unhealthy, we would make a second sheet.
Yeah.
Like a pivot table 2.
Yep.
And have the next set.
Okay. Yep. So you just go same process. You go here. I think can you right click and do it? I don't know. No, you can't do that. You can go to data then and pivot table and drop it in, and it'll ask it another set of questions. Like if I wanted to have the student names and I wanted to know, oh, there I get them in columns. I don't want that. But if I put them in rows, student, oops, darn it, student, take that out. Okay, and then what if I wanted to have a nice easy across these columns? I want to have another way of looking at the data. Here I take healthy or junk and I make it a column. So now I'm going to have Autumn, healthy, junk, and her grand total. So this is a good way to see what the kids are eating, is to split them out over columns. And now we need a number, we need a value. So we're going to count the student names again. So there we go. And if we just do a little formatting, oops, do a little formatting of this stuff to keep it all nice and tidy. So there's all, what did I just do? Undo. All of these things right here we can take, and then we can see that information from the kids a little bit easier now. When it's
Get out a glance for each kid.
Yep, exactly. Yep, and so pivot tables allow you to do that. So, like I said, kind of think about if, I don't know, are there any types of situations you're in where you're collecting information from kids, like a diary or journal type thing, or what?
Not particularly like that. We do use forms as like a way of assessment, maybe like in reading, where they might be answering some questions about characters or setting.
Right.
Or I'm thinking if you have grades, how student did across a unit or something along those lines. With pivot tables might be useful.
Yeah, you can definitely with a grade book. With a grade book, you can go ahead and do pivot tables with those as well. It's kind of summarizing the student data. I was going to think of another. The other area that you might have them in is something like in rosters. So if you were doing running a tournament, let's say, or running a debate kind of event, and you had to come up with different rankings of different rounds and all that kind of stuff, and you needed the kids' information, you might actually be able to use a pivot table to help out with that. So, for example, I'm trying to think right now off the best example I would have of something like that. I can put, let's put in, well, let's just use this. I'm going to drop this data table over. This is actually, this is one, actually I'm not going to do the full thing. I'll select these scores. These are a set of assessment scores of our same kids, right?
Okay.
So I'll just drop this on sheet 1. Okay. So first thing I always do with any spreadsheet is drag that little gray row down with that little gray bar, and it freezes the top row. So always do that with the very first thing you ever do in a spreadsheet. And so now with our, this is test scores. So here we have our kids, same kids again. We got the years. We've got this grouping that they're in of some sort, and then there's these different assessment scores that they have. So I want to look at this information, and so if you're in PLC structures, do you guys use data-driven PLCs? Or professional learning communities that are, it's a slightly different version than the way, or definition than the way you talk about PLCs.
Not based on like student data necessarily.
Okay, cool. There's a bunch of different models of it, and that's one of them. Is it does deal with teachers looking at student data in order to come up with, inform their instruction, basically. And so they may be in a situation like this where they need to calculate some different results, some test scores, and find some different similarities or differences, like maybe between these groups. Is there one group that's doing much better than another, and why? What teaching practices are going on in that room that are not going on in the other room? So those types of things that you would normally, those are the types of questions you would ask in a PLC. So here with our sheet 1, this, we're just going to call this test data. Now these are fake numbers, I just made them all up. But the concept will be the same, it'll still work. So if I want to build a pivot table off of this, we're going to select everything, and we're going to close this little guy over here. I'll reload. Something went wrong. Always refresh, and usually it will fix the problem. And so we're going to add, and so what would we, if you're looking at this, what kind of types of questions could we ask about this data?
We could ask about a student across different years within the same subject, so literacy. We're thinking Mayor Bree, how does she do in literacy across those different years she was tested? Excellent.
So let's try to do that. So let's look at our test data. We said we wanted the years. So years were across the top, right? So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add that in our columns first. I'm going to start there. Why not? So there's our years across the top. And then down the row we have we could do our kids, or you were saying literacy, right? Those are the actual literacy scores themselves, right? The way that, so see what that's done is it's pulled all of those unique scores in. So that might not be how we do it. So
so it's not breaking it down by student or year.
So if we do it by student here, and then we can see the student scores, with the student score was for each they only took each of these once, so this isn't really the greatest example, but it'll still illustrate the point. So I'm gonna just go with that for now. I'm gonna add in the values. I'm gonna add in, this is where the literacy comes in. So what do we want to do with something? We want to take literacy, and we want to do something. We want to summarize it by some formula, and these are the options. So the most frequent ones you use are sums, and count or count A. Count A is the one that I always say it counts a thing, and count counts numbers. So count A counts text and number values. Count only counts number values. And then all these other different types of mathematical formulation or calculations we could do. In this case, I'm going to do average for each for the literacy scores. Now, in this case, all of the kids only took it once, so it doesn't really make much difference, but it will show us a couple things here. You see here that in column B and in row 3, there's these blank rows, and I have that divide by 0 error. Those are because there are some blanks in the information, so I want to filter out those. Anything you don't want, you filter out. So in this case, I'm going to take literacy scores. I don't want any of those blank literacy scores because they throw my numbers off. So I'm going to uncheck blanks. So I'll show you that again. So you see what that just did? It made it a little tighter. Everything's nice and tidy now.
You got rid of that error part.
Yeah, exactly. I like to do a quick, I always like to add in some grid lines just so I can visually kind of see this a little bit better. And I hate the dark black ones, but let's do that. I like the kind of lighter gray color. And there we go, we can see a little bit more easily as we look across. So now each of these kids is going, we've got their scores overall. Now here's, we can also, if we wanted to add in groups now, think of the concept we did before, adding group. And in this case, I don't even want the kids' names. I want groups total. So here we go. I'm gonna shorten these numbers up there. They're at far too many places. We don't need that kind of significant difference. But we do have these little increase and decrease decimal places. So let's just make them whole numbers just so it's nice and easy. So there's our test scores across time for each of the groups. So we can see, now here's where spark lines come in. So this is going to get a little hard because I have to hide this. I'm going to go over this column here, and there's a formula in Sheets called spark lines. And when you start typing equals spark, it pops up. And I don't have to finish the whole formula out. I don't have to keep typing it. I just look at it. It says, oh, it says there's only one choice. So all I do is hit enter then, and it pulls it in. So what we want to create a spark line of is these cells right here. I don't really want the grand total. That doesn't make sense to me. But these ones, now watch when I hit enter, what happens in cell J2 or 3.
So it shows the increase.
Yep. So she's at a steady increase from low to high across them. Now for these other ones, remember this is just a formula. So when I double click in it, I see the formula and I learn more about it. Like that's the data, and then if there were any options, it would list them there. But I need to copy this down. So all I have to do is drag it down. Oops. Not right click. I've got my too many fingers on my touchpad here. And I'm going to drag that down. There we go. Looks like everybody overall scores were going up.
We're going up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
In this case.
So in terms of pivot tables, the three main things are you're always going to be adding something to depending on how you want to see it and what you want to see, to your rows, to your columns, and then to your values.
Correct.
That can always be switched depending on what data you're looking at and how you want to look at that data.
Correct.
Right? We looked at different ways to use the same data by putting it in the columns or the values. So it's just very much dependent on what you're looking at and how you want to see it.
Yep. Even so, here if I take columns in something like year, if I want it as rows instead, when I let go, it's going to do something funny. But then when I drop group and I put that into my columns, now I see, oh, here's the years and here's the groups across the top.
So there's always a little bit of shifting of multiple things.
Yeah, you should always drag things around and see what happens. I always say that. So you have to drag things around and see what happens because it's going to make a difference. So that's our pivot table basically.
No, this was great. This is, I think, very easy. Once you walked me through it, it seems easy, and now I see why it's useful, right? It's not only with like large sets of data, you can also use it within just your classroom.
Yep.
When you have, 22, 25 students, you have data around those students.
Exactly. And the thing is too, like, you can do different things with it. And this is where, the minimums that you have to have are rows and values. Actually, it could be columns and values too. I guess technically if you want, you can, if I drag this into columns, that is a valid chart. But it's just a little bit different way of looking at it. So you have to have at least one of these, either rows or columns, and you have to have values because it has to have some mathematical calculation that it's doing.
Okay.
And this can get super geeky as far as how you order these things and all kinds of fun stuff. And an interesting thing with that Google has done in this report editor now, there's this first little part that says suggested. And when you tip that open, it's saying, hey, it looks at the data and says, hey, maybe I could calculate average literacy score for each kid. Or what is the sum of science scores, or the average math level for each group? Those are human questions like we would ask in real words. And so you could spend a long time going out and calculating, summing them up and calculating them if they're in this group or that group or whatever. And instead, you could just build a pivot table, and in a couple clicks, I have that. This is what that was saying. What's your average of, make that wider so you can see, average of math level for each of the different scores, or each of the different groupings. So some of...
that was a couple of clicks.
Yeah. And here I'm just flipping back and forth between different suggestions. So always take a look at that. If you don't know where to start, select your information, select the data, and then you can, if it's a pivot table already, it'll give you some other suggestions. If not, you might be in a table like this right here, even on this pivot table, and our Explore tool down here in the lower right. When you tap that, it'll open up the Explore panel, and here's a lot of the different graphs that you can that would make sense on this data set. So we've got here sum of science versus year. I don't know what that really means, but we could change that to average, for example, would probably be better. But then here's what I really love about it is this last part here. It says the outstanding value peaks at 75 in 2004. So it kind of analyzes the data, and it gives you in real words, sentence, little phrase there, something to consider.
Yeah.
Tries to explain it. So yeah, you can do graph the median of year, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Great. I have a question. On the side over here, if you exit out of the pivot table editor, it says, the numerical sign NA. Where did that come in?
Oh, okay.
Arc line.
Yeah, it's an error. So anytime you see an NA, anytime it has a red corner on it, that little top dog ear kind of thing, if it's got a red tick there, it means there's an error of some sort. And so hover over it, and you can see. Sometimes it's gibberish, and you're not going to understand because it's total geek speak. But what it will at least do is give you an idea of where it's going wrong and what's going wrong. The sparkline thing is something's going on with that, and it's we expected to see two things, but we only found one. And that's what it's saying here, because when we open this up, it only found one data set, 1 point. Because remember, yeah, and then, so in this case, my sparklines were outside of my pivot table, so it broke it basically. I broke the system. But if I wanted to do, let's see, how can I do this? If I do, we want year across the top, because that's how those things happen. And for those, let's just do group. Okay, so now we have group by score. Now here we go. Let's see, this is actually a little more interesting, because here's some. Yeah, so now we can see with this one's trending up.
But yeah, you see the trends a little.
Up and down, yeah. Especially this group. What's going on there? They had a peak and then they dropped. That one anomaly. 1 week they did really well, and they hadn't been doing well in the past, but it was short-lived. Just a little peak.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, this looks great, Jay. Thank you. I think for now, questions are answered. I feel good about it.
Cool. And you got through conditional formatting and all of that? Yes, I've had a...
So our math coach here at school does a lot of that. So some of us know how to do it based on working with him.
Yep.
But not all of us.
Yeah. Well, the stuff for conditional formatting is if you it's I always think of it or say that it's always logical. So there's got to be you're building a case, like you're building a condition. If this condition is true, then color it this color or fill it in this color, or make it highlight it in red, so that, for example, if there was any scores here that were less than in this column right here, if there are any scores that were less than 5, let's see, conditional formatting. I'm going to say the less than. I'm going to put in the 5. So there we go. So now all those scores that are less than 5 turn up a color. Yeah. So by default it does that. You can make it be whatever you like, and then now visually those stand out a little bit more, and you can see where things are going wrong. One thing to do with done. Here's a pro tip: when you're doing these conditional formatting things, if you want to do the same, thing, but I want not less than 4. I don't want it less than 4, but I want it greater than 5.0. I want to add another one. If I just don't hit done, hit add another rule. If you add another rule now, it actually copies the same stuff over with the same parameters that you had, and then it's easier to change. So I want to say greater than 5, and those ones are going to be green.
Okay. Yeah. And then you got the...
Or you could do the same, even easier one. You do a conditional formatting rule with a color scale that goes from red to green. Yeah, there you go, done. So now my red scores are my low scores, my green scores. It's a scale with color gradients. Anything else on the checklist? These formulas about ifs, those ones, again, it's logic. It's condition. You count if this is true. So count these numbers over here. If they're in the West group, then count the numbers. Is kind of what it's getting at there. So it's.
You insert it just the same way you would with a regular formula?
Yeah. You just equals. You start typing equals count if. Like if I just start typing one here, equals count. Now always watch your screen. Don't watch your fingers. If you're a touch typist, you have an advantage because Google's going to guess what ones you want based on what you've typed so far. So you can do a count, and then it says the value 1, value 2. I'm going to count if, just to throw that in here. Now these little, see how when I go into this, I have this text pop-up here, right here. This teaches you how to speak like a geek when you talk about the range and criterion of your count-if statement, your count-if formula. But here I like it because it highlights range in both cases here. So the range, that's this stuff, the A to A10 or whatever. Now in my case, my range is going to be B1, B2 to B. So it's going to go all the way down to the bottom of B. And then the criterion is what do those things have to equal. So I'm going to count it if it's going to be greater than 15. So put in a comma. And you see how it switched right there. So now I see that this is yellow. Criterion is yellow. And when I was back here, range is in yellow. So that's how you learn from the formula editor, or this little formula builder itself. It'll teach you how to speak like a geek. So we have 5. Count if those numbers are, that's because that's greater than 15, and that's greater than 15 as well. If I had done it like B2 to B6. No, there's four numbers in that case. It should be 3 to 6 technically, but you get the idea. So count ifs, if you have the count ifs plural in there, it counts depending on the multiple criteria. So you want to say if it's less than 15 and is some other criterion 2 is also true, then it'll count them. It has to have both of those as true.
Okay. So like if you wanted less than 15 and I don't know, like greater than something else, or
yeah.
What would that?
It could be that. It could be another whole column. Let's say what if I wanted all girls. I was looking at some gender differences and trying to investigate those. And so I could say count if the student was a girl. So maybe we had a column where it had their gender listed, and then the thing that we're actually summing or counting or something like that is another column. It's another. In this case, we're counting their test scores. Let's say on a particular exam.